Good evening, folks, and welcome to the Horror Corner. I'm your host, Sean Patrick Urshan, and this is the top 20 for 2020 horror sequels. This series was created by Horrific Nightmares JM and The Horror Man. Keep in mind that there is the stipulation you can only use one film per franchise. Otherwise, this list would probably be a lot different. So let's get to it, shall we? In at number 20 is a film that I feel just doesn't get enough love, and that is Bride of Re-Animator. I think it's such a fun sequel, and I think Jeffrey Combs is equally as good in this film as Herbert West, as is Bruce Abbott as Dean Cain. And you also have Kathleen Kinmont as the bride, you may all know from Halloween 4. In at number 19 is Creepshow 2. An excellent sequel that, it doesn't get enough love. I mean, I love every story in this anthology film. Really awesome movie. I love it. Next up is Child's Play 2, Sorry Jack, Chucky's Back. One of my absolute favorite horror movie posters there. I just love that. Just a great sequel, and most people, I would say, put this, some people put this as the best in the franchise. In at number 17 is Sleepaway Camp 2, Unhappy Campers. Absolutely love this movie. This is one of the most fun slasher movies of all time. I really enjoy Pamela Springsteen in the role of Angela Baker, taking over for Felissa Rose. I think she did a great job. In at number 16, we are bringing Hammer into the fold, and I'm picking Frankenstein Created Woman, which I have as part of this 3-pack. It's my favorite of the Frankenstein franchise by Hammer, outside of the original The Curse of Frankenstein. Long-running series, but I just really like this one. To me, this is like their Bride of Frankenstein. In at number 15 is Jaws 2, basically the slasher movie in the Jaws franchise. It's basically a slasher with a shark, And you do have Roy Scheider returning in the role of Chief Brody, which is great, and he does an excellent job. It's a really solid sequel. In at number 14 is Phantasm 2, The Ball is Back. Really, really fun sequel. I do prefer the original, but this is more action-packed and probably quicker paced, I would say, than the original. Just really fun, and Angus Scrimm is amazing as the tall man. Reggie Bannister returning. He did have a different actor playing Michael Lowe, but he did a good job. In at number 13 is one you might say, oh, that's not a sequel. Yes, it is. Twins of Evil. This is the third entry in the Constantine trilogy from Hammer Films. All three based on the Carmilla novel. And yes, Carmilla is represented in all three films. So to me, it definitely counts. I absolutely love this movie. Awesome stuff. In at number 12, of course, is Aliens. I kind of debated whether or not to put this on here because it's not as much horror, it's more of a sci-fi action movie, but there definitely still is some horror in there. Not as much as the original Alien, but there's definitely some good scares in Aliens for sure. And at number 11 is Hellbound, Hellraiser 2. An absolutely fantastic sequel. So close to the original for me. I have a hard time choosing which one I prefer, this one or the original Hellraiser. This definitely has some of my favorite lines from Pinhead, and the scenes with the Cenobites are just some of my favorite. I mean, I absolutely love this movie. It's great. And of course you have Julia is such a great antagonist in this movie. In at number 10 is The Bride of Frankenstein. Of course you gotta have that on there. It's just known as being one of the greatest sequels of all time. And it certainly is. So you definitely gotta represent The Bride of Frankenstein from Universal Monsters. Got this cool, like, poster. Love that, it's so cool. Yeah, I love Bride of Frankenstein. Once again, you had an awesome performance from Boris Karloff as the monster, and bringing the bride into the fold was such a great idea, and I just love her reaction when she sees Frankenstein's monster. She just screams. Not quite the reaction he was hoping for. Next up is the Texas Chainsaw Massacre Part 2. Another film I just feel doesn't get enough love. It's kind of like polarizing. People seem to either love it or hate it. Some people think there's too much humor, and the tone is so much different than the original. Yeah, that might be true, but I just absolutely love it. I think it's an excellent sequel. And it certainly pays plenty of homage to the original. And of course you had Tobe Hooper returning to direct. And I love it, you know. To me, the characters are just unforgettable. You know, Chop Top, played by Bill Moseley. I think Bill Johnson did a great job as Leatherface. Some awesome gore effects by the legendary Tom Savini. And I just love the over-the-top craziness and zaniness. Especially Dennis Hopper as Lefty Enright, and I love Caroline Williams as Stretch, one of the best final girls in my opinion. And at number 8 is one that hardly anybody ever talks about, and that is Dracula's Daughter, which I have as part of this Universal Monsters collection. Yes, Dracula's Daughter is the official sequel to Dracula. And it features the Countess Maria Zaleska, which is just a great movie. I absolutely love it. It's got some incredible gothic atmosphere, and I love the performance by Gloria Holden as the Countess. And just a great movie. It's so well done, and no one ever talks about it. Criminally underrated. In at number 7 is Psycho 2, which I have as part of this 3-pack here. Yes, Psycho 2. I mean, you might think it's crazy for them to come up with a sequel to the original Psycho, especially like 25 years later or wherever it was. But to me, it makes perfect sense, because obviously Norman was in jail that whole time for murdering people. And I just think it's so well done. You had Vera Miles returning as Lila Loomis. You had a great performance by Meg Tilly. And of course, Anthony Perkins is just amazing, Oscar-worthy in this film, you know, as Norman Bates. And I just love the story behind it. I love how they try to basically drive Norman to murder, you know, just so he could get thrown back in jail because they feel he shouldn't have gotten out. And, you know, kind of can see that side of it, you know. Number 6 is Evil Dead 2, Dead by Dawn. Absolutely love this movie. I mean, it's just legendary. Of course, Sam Raimi interjected a lot more slapstick comedy in this film. You know, Definitely kind of went another route with the sequel, but it's still batshit crazy. It's just insane. It's just zany. It's nuts. I mean, it's just great, though. You got an amazing performance by the legendary Bruce Campbell as Ash Williams, and he's never been better than he has been in Evil Dead 2. Next up in at number 5 is Brides of Dracula from Hammer Films. It's the second entry in the Hammer Dracula franchise. And yes, it doesn't have Christopher Lee in the role of Dracula, but it does have Peter Cushing in the role of Van Helsing, and he has never been better. Absolutely brilliant performance by Peter Cushing. And you do have a Dracula-type character in the film, you know, the Baron Meinster. Not sure why they chose not to put Christopher Lee in the sequel, but this is just a fantastic sequel and the best sequel in the Hammer Dracula franchise as far as I'm concerned. As much as I love the sequels with Christopher Lee, you didn't have Peter Cushing, and, you know, it's just so well made, I can't deny how good it is. Number 4 is A Nightmare on Elm Street 3, Dream Warriors. You gotta put that up towards the top. I mean, such a great sequel. Everybody knows it. Everybody loves Dream Warriors. Everybody loves the soundtrack. Everybody loves Freddy's one-liners. And everybody loves the fact that Heather Langenkamp returned as Nancy Thompson. You have Patricia Arquette does an amazing job as Kristen Parker. Just an awesome, awesome sequel all the way around. And in at number 3 is, of course, Friday the 13th, Part 2. Which is the first horror movie I ever saw, and it scared the living crap out of me. And I just think this film is amazing. It just ups the ante from the original film. There's more action, more thrills and chills, and yeah, it expands upon the legend of Jason Voorhees, of course. Here he is the killer, whereas the original Pamela Voorhees was the killer, Jason's mother. And I love the look of Jason in this film, even though it's not the classic look with the hockey mask. He had the burlap sack, you know, old sackhead Jason, which I think is actually even scarier than the hockey mask, but that's just me, you know. And this is the last time in the franchise to me where I feel they tried to scare you, that this was a scary movie, you know. Number 2 is Dawn of the Dead, of course, by the legendary George A. Romero. Yeah, of course, it's a sequel to the original Nightmare on Elm Street, the original Night of the Living Dead, of course. And yeah, absolutely one of the greatest horror sequels of all time, one of the greatest sequels of all time. Incredible zombie carnage. The mall setting is amazing. I love all the characters. Just a phenomenal sequel. And you had that great soundtrack too by Goblin, who is known for being in a lot of Dario Argento's movies. And Dario Argento did work on the Italian version of Dawn of the Dead, you know. Next up in at number 1 is a surprise to probably nobody. If you know me and if you know my channel, I'm not going to say too much about it, but Halloween 2 from 1981, which is what I feel the greatest horror sequel of all time. So it makes number 1 on the top 20 for 2020 countdown, which was created once again by Horrific Nightmares JM and the Horror Man. So thank you guys for joining me, Sean Patrick Urshan in the Horror Corner. Tune in and stay scared.